Wind Energy Council. That picture of those, the lovely wavy picture, is the first offshore wind farm in the U.S. It's only 5 turbines down off Rhode Island. It's the harbinger of things to come. Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, Virginia, New Jersey, and New York now are all going great guns on the offshore side. A little bit about who we are and what we do. As I said, it was established in 2005, legally established in 2006, and then they got enough money to hire somebody to run it. At the end of 2006, and I jumped in. 3 main objectives for the organization. One is that we are sort of the industry document of record for statistics, projections, market growth, all those kind of stats. Second thing is to represent the sector with the International Energy Agency, with climate negotiations, with now the International Renewable Energy Agency, the World Bank, the regional development banks, any of the various international institutions in the multilateral system, but most importantly, with opening new markets in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. We're involved in other wind associations in the US, Canada, North America, and Europe, of course. So I don't work in North America hardly, I don't work in Europe hardly. It's virtually all, and these are our members, companies. The associations are at the bottom, so that's Brazil, US, Italy, Mexico, Uruguay, Germany, Canada, China, Denmark times 2, times 3, Holland, India, Norway, Japan, Korea, South Africa, Turkey, Germany again, and the European Association. So those are my constituents, so to speak. Just run through some of these statistics pretty quickly. Growth of the industry fairly substantial over the last 16 or 17 years. Now the total installed capacity of wind energy globally is a little bit more than half of the total generation capacity in the United States, as a reference. Not evenly distributed. Annual markets, subject to the vagaries, particularly of the US Congress and the global recession between 2009 and 2012. But that's pretty much stabilized now. Top 10 globally, China very much in the lead, the US second. India is now in 4th place, having overtaken Spain, and Brazil is climbing up the list. Since 2010, the majority of installations of wind have been outside of the OECD countries, so outside of the rich countries. So you see them start to, originally it was just the US, Germany, Denmark, and Spain, completely dominated. Now more and more, it's China, India, Brazil, and South Africa, and Argentina now, etc. Annual markets, similar sort of phenomena. China, US, etc. Brazil going up the list. South Africa, and then Finland had a particularly good year last year. With the regional distribution, it always was more or less equal division between the 3 large markets in North America, Europe, and Asia, but Asia has taken over, which is logical given where the electricity demand growth is, where the economic growth is, and where the people are. And Latin America is coming along. Latin America is, in this chart, is deceiving because for international energy purposes, Mexico is considered part of North America. Offshore wind is the new big thing, particularly over the course of the last 2 years because of the price breakthroughs in Europe, where now it's cheaper to build an offshore wind farm than it is to build a new gas or a coal plant in Europe. We're not there yet here in this country. The first PPA for the Block Island wind farm is about 22 cents or 24 cents. Ridiculously high price, but they're competing with diesel. And they were paying, because before that, Block Island had a big diesel genset for which they were paying 35 cents, 38 cents. So 8 cents there. But I think the U.S. industry now, the goal is to get down to 12, 11, 10 cents in the next go round, and then be competitive with new build anything else in this country, and then the next generation hopefully will make it more competitive than anything else, because the wind resources off the East Coast here are, well, You could power the whole country on the wind in the resources in less than 50 meters of water between Cape Cod and Cape Hatteras. Do that, well, it's a tremendous, tremendous resource, and now that the prices are coming down, it's a huge opportunity, especially for places like Boston, but more especially for Rhode Island and Delaware and other places whose coastal maritime industries have been in the dumps for a very, very long time. And all those states are trying to attract the European companies who are coming in to do this, and some American companies now, to revitalize their maritime industry. Just because I'm here in the US, give you an idea of the distribution of the actual production of wind energy in this country. Iowa's still the leader. They get almost 37% of their electricity from wind now. Oklahoma is very close behind, as is Kansas. Well, Kansas is even closer. North and South Dakota are very strong. Colorado, Texas, of course, is the leader in terms of total installed capacity, but it's in total generation, but it's a much, much larger demand. California gets a lot of wind. They don't do anywhere near as much as they say they are. Although the solar industry is doing very good. Maine is picking up, and we now have, before the entire southeastern part of the country was all white for many, many years. But Amazon built the first wind farm in North Carolina last year, and there was one that went up in Tennessee from a private investor. So we'll see what happens in that part of the country. But there are manufacturing jobs for the wind industry in all 50 states, including 6 or 8 firms here in New Hampshire. We'll set up something like that if anybody's interested. I can look them up. So my job is focused at this point primarily on these new markets. I mean, Mexico, Brazil, and South Africa were the ones, say, for the last 4 or 5 years. Brazil is going great guns now, despite the political and economic crisis down there, which you read about. I'm going there next week. We have already a show. The Mexican one was going great guns, as those of you who pay attention will know. A new leftist populist president was elected in Mexico about 4 weeks ago. In the initial part of his campaign, he was going to try to undo all that and renationalize all the industries. Because Mexico completely nationalized its energy industry with the new constitution in the early part of the previous century because they didn't want American companies taking over and running the whole show. But they liberalized it about 10 years ago to allow private investment, not 10 years ago, 6 years ago. And it's had a very positive effect. Whether that will be undone now, ask me this time next year. South Africa was going great guns. Then with the crap with President Zuma and the corruption and basically the whole country coming to a screeching grinding halt over the course of the last 12 months, everything was on ice, but that's now all unblocked with the new president, Cyril Ramaphosa. We'll see how that goes. We'll be going down there for our annual show in November. Elsewhere in Africa, there's a lot going on. Morocco and Egypt in particular, Ethiopia in particular, but also the largest wind farm in Africa in Kenya, and the first one now being built in Tanzania. In Asia, too much to even go into, except that what we're really focusing on now is Vietnam. Tremendous wind resource, no indigenous fossil resources, a rapidly growing economy, one of the most corrupt governments in the world. That's a separate problem. Same true in Indonesia. Mongolia is fabulous, except for the fact that it's completely surrounded by China and Russia. And there's no way to get the power out. But the amount of wind and solar resources in Mongolia would be enough to power all of Asia if they had a way to get it out. We're working on it. And Iran, well, they have their own indigenous wind industry. It was going great. Then the first round of sanctions about 6 or 8 years ago, and now they basically have all these companies ready to go and build lots of wind power in Iran, but they can't. And until the U.S. Treasury Department decides that anyone who does business with Iran is not a whatever, nobody can, or nobody cares. Anybody who has any operations that involve the U.S. Treasury Department are not going to touch Iran with a barge pole. So Tehran and everywhere else continues to be polluted by oil-fired power stations. South America, Uruguay. Uruguay's about maxed out now. They've got 40% of their electricity from wind power and all the rest from hydro. So they're trying to sell some to Brazil and some to Argentina. Argentina is the big exciting new market in South America simply because they had, Argentina was one of the richest countries in the world up until about World War I. and it's been run largely by crazy people ever since. So crazy they wrote an opera about it and had Madonna in the starring role. Peronistas were finally voted out in the end of 2015. New government came in. An old friend of mine who was the energy advisor to the former mayor of Buenos Aires came in there, and they've been going, great guys. We have great hopes because Argentina, don't cry for me, Argentina. Argentina makes a lot of people cry all the time. We're hoping it will happen this year. And the two big new ones, Russia, there was a big push when Medvedev was president, and between the Putin thingies, he wanted to modernize the economy and exploit Russia's wind resources, and solar, which you can imagine are enormous, it being the world's largest country by far, consisting mostly of empty space, and very windy empty space, and in the southern half of it, very sunny empty space, especially the desert bits. Putin came back in, well, he was only interested in Arctic oil. The price of oil's down, so it's starting again. The first commercial wind farm in Russia came online in February. They've tendered out about 3 gigawatts. It's still very hard to do business in Russia. It's still mysterious, but it's happening, so we'll see. And the last one, you may have read about the new crown prince in Saudi Arabia who wants to modernize the economy. Well, one of the ways he's doing it is with wind and solar. And it's happening, it's starting. There is no market, there is no rules, there is no contracts, there are no banks. It's a really rare place to try and do business. But as the Saudis attempt to, some parts of the Saudis attempt to reform their country to become more like the rest of us in some fundamental ways, it's a huge opportunity. Because their energy consumption is absolutely enormous. As you can imagine, all those giant mansions. They need to be air conditioned. Well, they need to be air conditioned down to about 70 degrees, and if it's 120 outside, it's a lot of electricity. The Saudis' domestic electricity consumption and their domestic oil consumption is now up to about 45% of their production. And since it's the only thing they have in terms of an economy, they kind of got to do something or they'll be out of business pretty soon. They're going to have to sell their Rolls Royces. Thanks. Anyway, so that's that. How am I doing? I should move along here. Okay. Yeah. I think with the price breakthroughs in wind and solar energy, among energy planners now, the question is no longer if we're going to have an electricity system that's dominated by wind and solar. It's when and how quickly, and how much of the rest of the economy is going to be electrified to accommodate that, because it is far and away the cheapest way to produce energy almost everywhere. Solar, more in deserts, wind, more everywhere else, and plus in deserts. It's windy. Big focus on electrification of the transport sector. Hasn't really taken off here much yet, but it's starting. In places like Amsterdam, where I live, charging poles are everywhere. Oslo, I think 60% of the new car sales in Norway are electric, and they're building electric airplanes. The big issues that we have, really, is in terms of solving this little climate problem that we have, are steel manufacturer, cement, ships and planes. Steel manufacturer, we can create the heat for steel manufacturer from electricity, that's not a problem. But coke and coal. There are alternatives, it's more expensive, but a very large portion of the emissions from steel manufacture is from the coke and coal. Same with cement, the calcium carbonate they burn in there releases huge amounts of carbon dioxide, quite apart from the heat you use to run it at a very high temperature. And then ships and airplanes. Ships, we've got river barges, we've got ferries being electrified. There's a big push now to use ammonia produced by electricity in order to create a storable, usable fuel. You can burn ammonia directly, you can use it directly, so you can use it in a variety of ways. But long-haul flights and transoceanic ships are still something that we need to sort out. I think we'll get there. We have the technology once. When I first started doing this, we didn't have the technology. We definitely, 30 years ago, didn't have the technology. Even 20 years ago. Now we do. question is whether or not we do it in time to save the money. For that, I will say one of the things we can do now because of climate change, which we couldn't do 40 years ago, or we could only do with great difficulty 40 years ago, was sail through the Northwest Passage, which I had the pleasure of doing last summer. Always one of on my bucket list. This little blue dots, starting in New Zealand and ending up in Amsterdam. I did not do the whole trip. A good friend of mine had a boat, was Dutch, a ice class boat in New Zealand. Going to bring it home to the Netherlands. The first ship to make it through the Northwest Passage was Roald Amundsen. In 1906, it took him 3 years to drift over from Norway. The first small boat to make it through in the modern era was a yacht in 1983. It took him three summers to get through. Once you go as far as you get, it starts to freeze, and you lay up someplace and wait for the next year. It's much more common to do it in 1 year now. And you may have read the stories or heard the stories of the thousands of mostly British adventurers in the 19th century who left their bones up there trying to find this Northwest Passage. We happened across quite a few of those. But we made it through in 1 year. We had some ice. We had a couple of dodgy bits. But not too bad. This was the boat, Tiama, 50-foot, ice class Antarctic expedition vessel is what it was built for. There were 6 of us, although only 2 made the entire trip from Auckland to Amsterdam. There were various crew changes. I got on in Nome. Here we are leaving Nome in Alaska, looking very cold. I was very cold. I come straight from here, and it was, Nome was fine on shore, but you get out into that water, which is about 34 degrees. It's chilly pretty quickly. This was the first ice we encountered in the area between Barrow, Alaska, and Prudhoe Bay. Lots of this ice and fog, and that's what makes it difficult, because when there's sort of 3, 4, 5 tenths of ice like that, and you can see well, you can, especially in a small boat, it's easier to maneuver around. When it's foggy, you can't see anything. You just blunder into stuff, and it can get pretty ugly pretty quickly. And remember, with these pieces of ice, you're only seeing the top 10%. So you have to be rather careful. This is this North Star plant that finally did get built, the one that I talked about before. We had the ice camp to prevent, and the skipper there on the left had been the base leader of that ice camp. We worked together on the original Rainbow Warrior in 1985. He's a good friend, but we were the geriatric expedition. I was 61, he was 63 then. Everybody else was over 60, including a 74, 75-year-old retired Scottish anesthesiologist who was blind in one eye, almost completely deaf, and a pacemaker. This big box of pills that we had to live in every day. We had a 25-year-old Maori kid who did all the heavy lifting. I was on watch with him, so that was. Ironically, we didn't see polar bears except just 20 miles off Prudhoe Bay at this Eskimo hunting camp, which is used for bowhead whale hunting in the spring and fall. We got there the night before. We were going to go ashore. We decided to take a nap instead. By the time we got into the nap, there was mama and cubs on the beach, and we decided not to go ashore. We sat there for about 36 hours, and there were about 14 bears there, which we could watch safely from 100 yards offshore. It was fantastic. Then the ice moved away, and they were gone. And we went over to, this is Demarcation Bay. We spent a lot of time trying to fish and whatever, without a great deal of success. The natives fish with seine nets, and they have it down to an art, and they can do it, but white fellas aren't allowed to do that. It's only the natives who can fish with seines, so with a hook and lure, singular worms or whatever. We've taught a couple archery charm. And thanks to Gordon, I reacquainted myself with a 12-gauge shotgun, which I hadn't fired one since I was 12. Because we always took them ashore everywhere. Fortunately, we never needed to use them. But we were in the territory of the only mammal that actively hunts humans. So it's a bit crazy. This is the the extreme eastern end of the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. This photo is not retouched. This photo it's what it looked like. It's just an amazingly beautiful, pristine place. A place called Johansen Bay. Except for the fact that we had been fishing up the river and trying to wake up somebody on the boat to come pick us up from shore. In the Arctic, you have all these weird visual hallucinations, mirages, whatever you want to call them, weird optical effects, ice blink and water blink and all the rest of it, so you can see. And this is the only one that I was, with my extremely amateur photography skill. This is an island just outside of Johannesson Bay, which we just left. This is the same island about 30 seconds later. As you can see, most of it is a reflection, but it looks like that. And this was happening all the time. It's really weird. And there's various other things. But we are in these high latitudes. It's not only magnetic compasses that don't work. So this was the tough bit. I don't know how many of you know the geography of northern Canada. You would have no reason to. But this is the central bit of the Arctic where most of the 19th century British expeditions came to grief. The Boothby Peninsula in the center, and then Prince, so many islands. But that whole bit there is where the Franklin expedition came to grief, where many others came to grief, and there are lots and lots of British bones out there, and remains of British boats, one of which was only actually found finally last summer. The Erebus and the Terror, the two Franklin ships. They found the first one. It was the Erebus they found in 2014, and the Terror they found last summer. With satellites, but getting up through along from Joe Haven, which is where the ship is from, up through that bit was really the toughest part. This is Joe Haven. This is where Amundsen went before he did either his transoceanic trip or he was, of course, the first guy to get to the South Pole. He went to live with, sorry.
I just want to ask, I didn't hear you say that you're getting through the northern pass now because of climate change, really. Things are melting more, and it's more open. I mean, what the other ships in the 1900s or 1800s did, it was just solid ice all the time.
Oh, solid ice all the time. It would open up. I mean, it's, yes, there's a much higher chance of getting through now. Yes, the Arctic ice cover has reduced quite dramatically in the last 40 years. But still up there, it's a question of wind and tides as much as it is of the ice. Because the fact that there's 40 million square kilometers less Arctic ice doesn't matter if the 2 square kilometers in front of you are packed solid and you can't go on, which is what happened this summer, not to us, but it did to a couple of other boats. And 3 years ago, none of the boats made it because of wind. But yes, of course, as I said, the first boat to go through in the water narrow was 1983. It took them 3 years, and they thought that was pretty good. But your window, you know, it will break out in various places, like where we are here, usually by mid-August, and then it will stay open until it starts to freeze again, which used to be somewhere about the 3rd week of September. Now it's in the middle of October. But we got through that tough bit. It was the 25th, 26th of August, I think, when we got through something like that. And that's really, you know, whether you go east to west or west to east, getting through there at the 25th of August, then you have a long way to go before you go to safe harbor. Because going to the west, you have to go all the way back across Canada, all the way around Alaska to get to Nome, if you want to spend the winter in Nome, which you don't, believe me. And it's a lot further than that down to somewhere in Cook Inlet, like Homer or somewhere down there, and even further down to Seattle. Coming the other way, you have the same problem, which I'll get to in a minute. Then you come out into the Baffin Bay, and then where are you going to go? St. John's, Newfoundland? Okay, but still quite a long way. So that's really the tricky bit, is to time it so that you get through the tough bits with enough time to get out of there to someplace safe before either hurricanes in the Atlantic or the Bering Sea fall storms, which are equally not a place you want to be outside. But this is Joe Haven. This is where Amundsen went to learn how to survive in the Arctic. He married one Eskimo woman, and then eventually she died, and he married another one, and lived with them for years and figured out how to do Arctic survival, which was very different than the British, again, who went off there with their horses and all the rest of the stuff, and all died. He lived, and that's a monument to him up on the hill behind the boat. So anyway, here we are heading out from Joe Haven into this mess. And again, this ice cover is not terribly hard, except for the fog. You can't see anything. It makes it ridiculous. And this is one of our other boats. Again, with visibility, you can move your way through, but you never know when the fog's going to come down. Now this, I don't actually work. It's just about a 30-second video. I can't do it like magic with a remote, but we did a lot of this.
How about this picture first? How about this picture first and then the arrow? And then click the arrow.
Anyway, you see that 80% of the ice is below the water. That was the really thing down
Do not try this alone. Do not try this in someone else's boat.
He would insist on driving in these factories.
Ain't going that way?
So you have somebody up at the spreaders
Yeah.
try to see.
Okay.
What's the air temperature at this time?
It's 36, 37, 35.
Going straight.
Yeah. Anyway, just to give you a little flavor of what we're up. We spent a few days doing that, which was, as I say, it was great fun until the fog comes down and then you're just wondering about we kept doing it. But we did make it through, and we made it to the Hudson Bay Company outpost on the east side of Bellot Strait, which is, it's not still maintained by the Hudson Bay Company, but the hut is in there, and the sailors that go through, they leave stuff, toilet paper and tin sardines and whatever, and scribble their names on the wall inside. And this is our whole crew. So there was only one woman. She turned 60 during the trip, so she qualified for the geriatric brigade, but the young fellow on the left there was the one who did all the heavy lifting. And this was Franklin's hut on Beachy Island, where he spent 2 winters trying to get through, and I didn't seem to have a photograph, but one of the main problems they had was the British had just discovered canning, putting food in cans, but major mistake. They sealed it with lead, and there are all these bits of, the lead is still there. There's little bits of rotten wood, little bits of rotten steel, but the lead is still there. And it's still there in the brains of all the dead sailors that the fire escape, which is not a good thing. Another Hudson Bay outpost was the room with a view. Very nice. Abandoned. Then we headed across Baffin Bay. Once we were through there, we didn't have any more problem with pack ice, so we had was these guys, which are generally easy to see. But this was also by the 1st or 2nd of September, so we had our first dark since early July. So it was, again, I had the 12-4 along with the 24-year-old Maori kid with the good eyes, and he stood outside with his eyes completely peeled with no lights to look for any of these things in the middle of the night. And I had about 3 hours going trying to find them. We didn't hit any, which is a good thing, because there wouldn't be much left. And here's where we made our first landfall in Greenland. And one of the coolest thing about the entire trip, this is a place called Mellum Fjord on the west coast of Disco Island, is we wandered in there and managed to find a little anchorage tucked in behind. There's no charts really of any of this. And we were very pleased to be able to drop the anchor, look around and say, it's possible another human being was here once, but it's equally possible there never was. And it's kind of nice to know that there are places still like that left on the planet. This was a particularly large. These all come from the Ilulissat Glacier. It comes out with what used to be known as Jakobshavn, about halfway up the Greenland coast, and there's a 90-something% chance that this was where the iceberg that sank the Titanic came from. It's the most productive glacier out there. We have these little miniature apartment buildings floating around. Driving right up into the face of the thing, trying not to hit anything. and here's the last day before I got off the boat. At the face of the glacier was a whole field of snow, and it's just beyond words to describe. And Jess very great to it. Thanks very much. Oh, I wanted to pay homage to the people who supported me on this trip and who put up with me for the last 35 years or so. So I run off and do all the rest of this crap. But thanks very much.
A few questions, and then refreshments. And all at once.
So I'm trying to struggle. A kid who jumps off a school building in Antrim has the knowledge and ability to walk into Soviet or China. What happened to you to make you feel comfortable that you could go into these new markets, different language, different culture, and be able to communicate well?
I've been doing it for a long time.
Yeah.
By then, but I don't know. I was lucky in a lot of ways, but I think also lucky growing up at the time that we did, where my mother was telling me, you can do whatever you want, constantly, and there was a fair amount of evidence to support that in terms of the stuff that people were doing around the place, and a time of big change in my formative years. And you know, when I got out of school, I see my own kids struggling with, and I see kids struggling today, these highly competitive school situations, a really tough job market, financial difficulty. We didn't worry about any of that shit at all. I didn't anyway. I always did support myself if I need to, but I wanted to do something that my main objective was to avoid a job where I was tied to a desk and do something interesting. So I think it was partly, you know, growing up at a place where the main thing I remember about growing up here is that I would get out of school from the age of 7, 8, with Arthur and John, go down and eat with a package of Oreos, then go out into the woods, or go anywhere you want, from age 6, 7. And you had to show up for supper, or when it got dark or something. Yeah. There were no rules, there were no restrictions, there was nothing. And it was,
No fear.
no fear. Well, I had fear of Jack LaMonda.
Yeah.
Jack LaMonda, who, when my hair got too long, chased me from the school down to my house carrying a butcher knife, just to make me cut off my hair. I feared Jack LaMonda, but I didn't fear it. I didn't fear bears, or I didn't fear pedophiles, or I didn't fear kidnappings, or there was none of that. We never locked the car. My mother left the keys in the car. Somebody took it for a joyride once, and they brought it back. I think that's a precious thing which people don't really appreciate, and it allows you to grow and not fear to try new stuff. That was partially, you know, the end of the 70s.